Welcome to the Ad Nauseam podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Welcome, listeners, to episode 153 of the Ad Nauseam podcast. My name is Dr. Jeff Winkle. I'm down here in the bunker with my good friend and co-host, Dr. David Noe. Dave, how you feeling this night?
I'm doing pretty well. We're back in the evening climbs, aren't we?
Yes, we are. Yeah. So I kind of like this rhythm.
I do too.
We tried the morning slot a few times, but
the morning show, the morning commute.
we tried to do like the wacky morning zoo.
That's right.
Yeah, it just didn't work, did it?
What we needed was one of those, squeezable horn things.
Yeah, exactly.
That people use.
Right.
We didn't have one of those.
An array of like ridiculous sound effects.
Right.
Well, I mean, if we can find that.
Also needed a weather guy.
You need a weather guy. Yeah, it's complicated.
It's a big production.
It is, yeah.
But you're feeling well, Jeff?
Yeah,
Feeling
I'm doing all right.
Summer classes going along?
Yeah, just fine. Nothing to really complain about.
Okay.
Except for the heat, the humidity.
Oh, we've had a lot of that.
Yeah, I don't want to be the grumpy old man
No.
complaining about the weather, but
That's where we're headed, though, both of us,
I
let's
know.
be honest.
I know. It's a little swampy out there.
I don't mind, though. I mean, as long as the sleeping is comfortable, which you can make it so by fans and ACs and so forth.
Yes. Yeah.
Endless cold washcloths, I suppose.
Right. So, yeah, exactly. So, I mean,
I don't. As long as I can sleep, I don't mind the heat during the day.
Yeah, I'm more or less with you. I like relaxing on my front porch with my wife. And,
That's correct.
And seeing the neighbors and talking to
Right.
people. But man, there are some hours of the day where that sun comes in. It's unbearable.
It bakes you. It puts me back on the streets of Rome in the summer.
Oh yeah,
You spent a summer there, right?
I did.
Trajan's Column.
Yes, I loved it. But man, the heat killed me.
Yeah, it's really something. Speaking of summers,
Yes.
it was 2021.
Okay, are we going back?
A little bit.
Okay.
I was just putting mind to this. Mrs. Noe and I were on our 25th anniversary trip, and we went to Vegas.
Nice.
True story. And we did some gaming, playing craps like High Point and New York and Die Rich and Crapless Craps. And it's true. And I did my research. And games like Hazard, Bank of Francesca, and Sick Bow.
Well, these are all like casino games.
These are all, casino games. But somewhere along the way, I started losing.
Oh no.
A lot. And I couldn't really find out why. It almost felt like I wasn't really playing at all, that I wasn't in it, so to speak. So I called one of those gambling hotlines.
Oh, you felt like you were like in trouble?
That's right.
Okay.
1-800-GAMBLER, and Kenny Rogers picked up.
What in the world?
But he wasn't selling chicken. And then Kenny, in a Houston drawl, said, "Of man's first disobedience and the fruit of that forbidden tree, whose mortal taste brought death into the world and all our woe. With loss of Eden till one greater man restore us and regain the blissful seat. Sing heavenly muse that on the secret top of Oreb or of Sinai didst inspire. That shepherd who first taught the chosen seed in the beginning how the heavens and earth rose out of chaos. Or if Zion Hill," and so on.
Kenny Rogers said this?
Yeah, long quote. And then I realized why I was losing. I wasn't really rolling those white cubes with the black dots at all.
What were you doing?
I couldn't even locate them. In fact, I hadn't seen them in weeks. I couldn't find them. And then I realized, thanks to Kenny, that it was a paradise lost.
Well done. Well done, man.
We need one of those horns.
We do need one of those horns. Oh, that was great. Yeah.
It's a long setup.
But it was a long setup. But I mean, just the thought of Kenny Rogers
answering the phone,
quoting Dante.
Dante.
Sorry, Milton.
It's okay.
Is funny in and of itself, right?
Yeah. So there we go.
There we go.
Nice. After your Crepes of Wrath last week, I feel like you upped the ante.
Oh, okay.
So I had to do something.
Excellent.
But what are we talking about this evening?
Well, we're going to close out this chapter of Marrou's History of Education tonight. We'll do our best to close it out. And we're in the middle of his section on Hellenistic education.
Yes, chapter 2 of the second part of the book. It's a massive tome.
It is a big tome.
We had Paideia, and showing that the system of education was established during the Hellenistic era.
Yep.
Say 323, death of Alexander, until Actium 31. But then this chapter is not about Paideia, the concept, but about the establishment of the Hellenistic educational institutions.
Right, and he focuses in particular on what's called the ephebia.
Right.
This system of education that's for young men, kind of roughly in their late teens, that he finds examples of all over the so-called Hellenistic world after Alexander. Yeah.
So we want to tell the listener, who Marrou is. I mean, we don't have to go through all these details each time.
Yeah, well, fill us in. Who was this guy?
H.I. Marrou, born in November 1904 in Marseille and died in April 1977. French historian, describes himself as a Christian humanist. This is his magnum opus, one of the first, if not the first individuals to synthesize the entire system of ancient education. So you can know something about ancient education, but he puts it all together in a nice, neat little package, you might say.
Yes.
Taking us from the very beginning, the conflict between the warrior culture of Homer and the scribe.
Yep.
And all the way down to the end of Antiquity.
Right. And we'll get there someday.
Yes, we will.
Right. So this is a multi-parter.
That's right.
Yep. So I think our plan is we're going to finish up this chapter and then maybe take a break.
Yes.
Do a few episodes on other topics.
That's right.
But we will definitely come back and to finish this tome.
Yeah, there seems to be a good response to this.
People seem to like it.
They seem to like it. Use it for, give themselves a glimpse as to what the ancients themselves thought about the educational process.
Right. I like it myself. This was something that was never... a major topic of my own education. It would pop up, here and there when talking about particular figures like Plato and his focus, but never kind of thinking about education in this broad expanse.
Synthesized and systematized.
Right. And I think as we'll see today is the phrase that keeps coming up to me as I read this stuff is, in many ways, nothing new under the sun.
Yes.
There's so many things about the ancient system and their problems and their tensions that remind me of problems and tensions today.
Should we do that in Latin?
Oh, sure. What would that be in Latin?
Nil novi sub solem.
Thank you.
There's nothing new under the sun.
Yes.
Always sounds more profound, right, in Latin?
That's right.
I think, Jeff, you have, speaking of profundity,
yes,
you have the opening quote this evening.
Right. So, I mean, the easy and I think probably logical thing to do would be to have a quote from Marrou himself.
Yes.
Right? But I'm not going to go there.
Okay.
So, I mean, this is really in some ways kind of a tease of an episode I would like to do, and a kind of a more narrow focus under this umbrella of the role of music.
Okay.
And we talked about how music was a central pillar.
Yes, we did.
From more or less
the educational
of the system of project from the beginning.
That's right.
And so I found this quote from this article called "The Ethical Power of Music: Ancient Greek and Chinese Thoughts." By one Yuhen Wang from the Journal of His Aesthetic Education from 2004.
Spring 2004. Where were you then when he was writing this article?
I was just about to get married.
Oh, interesting.
So
were you employed at Calvin College at the time?
I was not. I was teaching at Grand Valley.
Oh, okay.
Just down the road.
That's right, to the west.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So, spring 2004. This about to get married. So this summer is my 20th.
All right.
Next
Congratulations.
month. Yeah. So, and this is another kind of selfish reason for choosing this quote is I'm also fascinated by this interesting parallel between what's happening in Athens in roughly the 6th and 5th centuries BC and what's happening in China as well. And I would never claim to be an expert on Chinese history or Chinese philosophy, but I know enough to state that during that time period you have figures like Confucius expressing a kind of wisdom that dovetails with Socratean wisdom in these remarkable
surprising ways.
Right.
And wasn't the Buddha not long after that?
Yeah, right in that same kind of area. This remarkable kind of bracket of a couple of centuries. Just that in and of itself fascinates me. Right. And so it raises all these questions of, was there contact?
Yes, magi at philosophy.
Right.
The sages and the philosophers.
Exactly.
So let's have that quote, Dr. Winkle.
So, Wang writes, both the Chinese and Greeks are from around the 5th century BC to around the 3rd century AD, recognize the immense impact that music has on the development of one's personality, and both regarded it as crucial in cultivation for the proper disposition in youth. Music's power over one's ethos, that is, human disposition, was emphasized by Plato and by Chinese authors of various documents. As will become clear, music in both cultures was considered an important means for a proper education and a powerful tool for cultivating and controlling the people of a nation-state.
Now, can I interrupt here a minute?
Please.
Cultivating and controlling?
Yes.
Music as a means of control?
Right, this idea.
Is this why there's so much elevator music in all these different places that we go?
It makes you wonder. There's some kind of grand conspiracy behind it.
Right.
But it reminds you of Plato, in his Republic said, this kind of music's in, this music's out.
Right.
Because you can, the kids in their rock and roll.
That's correct.
That's right.
Another comment I would like to make before we get to the end is that I very much like the way that he translates ethos.
Oh, human disposition.
Human disposition.
Yeah.
A common way to translate it is character. And while I don't think that that's incorrect, when we talk about someone's character now, we tend to think of it in terms of his attitude, toward things, or the summary of accomplishments that he or she has based on skill and time and so forth.
Yeah.
But ethos as human disposition seems more like the notion of orientation. What is your mindset? How do you see things?
Yeah.
So I think for that reason, it's a good translation.
Excellent. Yeah. I like it too. Let me just finish it up here. So in both cases, the power of music was further connected to the way the universe works. The whole kind of idea of the music of the spheres, right? Which I also find endlessly fascinating. He goes on, yet despite their similar views about music, that would be the Greeks and the Chinese, the reasoning strategies used in the two cultures differ enormously. Observing how the two remote cultures conceive the relationship between music and the ethos may give us some insight into music's role in the aesthetic education among us modern listeners. So, without going into the details. So like I said, this particular topic doesn't really have much to what we're talking about today.
Okay.
But I thought it was an interesting kind of callback to that idea that music was so central to Greek education, apparently to Chinese ancient education as well. And I think we'd also been talked on the program about how that's not really a pillar anymore.
No.
Right?
Music is entertainment at best.
Right.
Maybe it is a little bit of character development in the sense that athletics is character development.
Yeah.
Doing something routinely, the 10,000 hours worth of practice notion.
Right. Yeah.
But you could slot in anything there. It doesn't have to be music. There's nothing great about music, so people think.
Exactly.
Put in any kind of difficult task.
Right. And it's almost a cliche that when there's a budget crunch, it's the music programs that get the axe amongst the first, right?
Do you remember the Baby Mozart movement?
Yes.
If you get your kid to listen to Mozart, it shapes his brain in a certain way.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Very popular. Sold a lot of CDs.
Yeah.
And got some people listening to Mozart. My understanding is there's almost no evidence for it.
That was my understanding as well.
Yeah, they would give babies like an hour to listen to a Mozart CD and then have them take standardized tests.
Yes.
And they could barely fill out their names.
Yeah, I love it. I remember seeing in the advertisements, you'd see pregnant women putting the headphones on, on their belly, right?
That's right.
They could even listen to it in utero.
That's correct. You can imagine the child saying, please turn that off.
Right.
Leave me alone. Give me some Haydn.
Exactly. But I find that a really interesting idea. And kind of sad that it has fallen from that place. I mean, I don't know quite what to think of the idea of music as a means to shape the ethos or control.
Cultivating and controlling the people of a nation state.
Right.
I was at a youth athletic event today in which one of my children was involved. And the athletic competition was about to begin. So immediately the Bon Jovi starts pumping on the overhead speakers.
Did it really?
On the sound system. Yeah, living on a prayer.
Oh, yeah.
And then something with a real beat, and it just struck me. The whole purpose of this music is to try to create a sense of excitement in the participants and in the audience.
Yes, absolutely.
And it works.
Right. Oh, yeah, without a doubt.
It definitely works.
That's interesting, yeah. And you had to like that because there's no music since 1992 that they could have chosen that would have had the same effect, right?
Right.
You have to dip back into the golden era.
Right. Are they going to start playing Kelly Clarkson there, to get everybody riled up?
Right, no. They want people to head for the exits, perhaps.
That's
right. All right, Dave. So shall we dive in?
Let's get right into it.
No shout out today?
No shout out, no.
Right.
But we're always willing to take them, looking for them. I like to talk about you all rather than our own hijinks and shenanigans.
Yes. Please write in. Let us know. We would love to celebrate you.
That's right.
Right. All right. We're going to start in a section that Marrou titles the ephebia outside Athens. Dave, why don't you read a little bit to get us warmed up?
Sure. So this is the bottom of page 108, entitled, like you said, "The ephebia was to be found in more than 100 Hellenistic cities all over the Greek world, from Marseille in the west, that's in France, to the Euxine in the east, and everywhere it had the same features as the Athenian. There were occasionally slight local variations. Thus, in Dorian cities, where the new institution could be combined with an old local tradition, the ephebes had a different name. Just as they were called Erenes in Sparta, so in Cyrene they were known as Triakatioi, and in Crete as Apadromoi or Agelaoi. Their training, which usually lasted a year, might last 2. In Cyzicus, this was exceptional, but in Apollonus, normal, whilst in Chios it seems to have lasted 3 years."
All right, so we have the same more or less kind of the same system that is aimed at young men. I think the brackets that,
ages of 14 to 21.
Yes, right. And
the third stage.
The third stage, so a 1 to 2 or 3 year
That's right.
kind of capstone to their primary and secondary education.
Yes. So from birth to age 7, we remember, that was not a part of Paideia at all. The children were kept at home. Mom had to teach them basic stuff. Yep. But at age 7, then they went to what we would call primary school, learn their letters and so forth. But not until age 14 did education begin in earnest.
Exactly. Right. So
the ephebia was all over.
It was all over the place. But Athens, despite the Macedonian conquest,
right.
and Athens in many ways past her prime in terms of her moment on the stage politically, but as an intellectual capital, right. it maintains that gleam throughout the Roman era, and so it becomes the model for all of these things throughout the vast territories,
and gave all these Greek-speaking children a similar experience.
Yes.
That's really remarkable.
It is.
It puts me in mind of something like Sesame Street.
Yeah.
Barney the Purple Dinosaur. I didn't really watch much of either of those.
No.
My kids didn't consume them a lot either.
Right.
But kind of universal, right?
Yeah.
And at least in America, a shared common experience for all of these little ones, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so there's this interesting tension going on, Marrou points out, is that there's a lot of similarities.
Right.
I mean, he's just talked about how, there are differences. These things had different names. It could be 1, 2, or 3 years. But there are a lot of the hallmarks of the old education going way back to Athens that were still visible. But there are some significant shifts happening where there's a move away from the idea that education should be for everyone and supports it can be broad civic good for the entire populace,
right,
to something more, capping your education meant you were becoming one of the elite. It's now more aristocratic than it is democratic.
Yes.
Yeah.
I liked very much what Marrou says in the middle of page 109, or I found it interesting, and that is that the military character began to retreat from this kind of training. It was no longer a preparation for defending the polis. Instead, he says, the Hellenistic ephebia had become aristocratic rather than civic, sporting rather than military. Mm-hmm. So you were cultivating, even if you were a person from the lower classes, you were cultivating the kinds of things that the upper classes did, but not with the aim of serving your polis in that project.
Right. And also, I thought this was quite interesting. Is Marrou makes the argument that the ephebia was very much geared towards putting up a boundary against barbarism.
Right.
It was about defining who was Greek and who was not.
So the barbarians are all those who cannot speak Greek.
Yes.
Right. At a bare minimum.
Right. And so the kind of the breaking down of previous boundaries made by the Alexandrian conquest.
Right.
Brings lots of these cultures in contact with one another, and there seems to be this reaction that education, or the ephebia, these upper levels of education, can cement the aristocracy. And as Marrou puts it, the point was largely to preserve a Greek way of life,
right,
and to show that I am not barbarians are over there, and over here we are the true Greeks.
Because we're participating in the ephebia.
Yeah.
We're getting a Greek aristocratic education.
Right.
We're studying Homer. We're doing this by means of literature, the Isocratean idea, from previous episodes. Literature itself is an education, says Isocrates.
Right.
Math is downplayed. Athletic things fade into the distance a little bit.
Yep, exactly. Or if there are athletics, the focus is no longer on training for war.
Right.
Marrou talks about how there were many of these. It's
more cornhole and jarts and things
lots of jarts.
Yeah.
Right. But he talks about how while many elites did go on to have a military career, is what increasingly starts to happen is in terms of at least staffing the army, they are drawing from mercenaries from the lower classes of Greeks. And so the sports that they're doing as part of the ephebia are kind of playing at military maneuvers. And it's about cultivating not a life as a soldier, but cultivating a life of sport.
Interesting.
And being good at those kinds of sports is a kind of elitist excellence, arete all its own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you read a little bit of the bottom of 109 there?
Sure.
Where he's talking about Roman Egypt. I think the sentence begins, "This can be clearly seen."
Yes, this can be clearly seen in Roman Egypt, where the process that had begun in the time of the Ptolemies reached its full development. There, the ephebia had become an official institution, part of the new municipal organization, and its function was to initiate young Greeks into the life of sport, which was the only thing that would make them truly civilized and set them apart from the natives, the Aegyptioi, Copts, who were despised as barbarians. For this reason, it began when they were 14 on the threshold of adolescence. But even though, as seems likely, the ephebia in the strict sense lasted only 1 year, they felt its effects for the rest of their lives. 10 or 14 years later, they would still be grouped together as old boys of the same class. It was only as members of a privileged aristocracy that in official declarations certain Greeks were able to have the words "old gymnasium boys" put after their names and their sons' names.
Interesting.
That's interesting, but it strikes me... Sport, but it also strikes me as very modern.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe not so much anymore. Maybe this is fading, but the way that many people look back on their college days.
Absolutely.
The way that people make friends in the dorms that become...
Or in high school, sporting activities.
Sure, exactly.
Didn't Bruce Springsteen write a song about this?
Yeah, kind of glory days.
That's right.
That's right. Kind of lamenting that one no longer lives in those times.
That's right.
Right.
And they were never as good experiencing them as they are remembering them.
Yes, right.
And one was never as gifted athletically or as successful as one remembers oneself.
Yes.
Just speaking abstractly, not getting personal.
Right.
But there is really something about that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
They must not have been playing golf, though, or tennis. You know why? Because if you start at age 14, there's no hope of ever competing successfully. In the sport?
In the sport, well, you got to start when you're 2.
Yes, 2 or 3.
Right.
These are such difficult sports. You play any golf?
No, I hate golf.
Tennis?
No, I hate that one too.
You hate them both?
Yes. Well, hate is a strong word.
No,
it's just never. I never liked it. Yeah.
Yeah, but the other sports, I think the barrier to entry is a little bit lower.
Yeah.
So they must have been doing something that wasn't too complicated. If you could start at 14 and still have a glory day.
I guess so. I mean, when I one of the things I wrote in the margins here was when it talked about kind of the life of the sport, kind of the two sports that jumped to mind were actually tennis and polo.
Oh, you said polo.
Well, I mean, those are two sports that I tend to kind of associate with the upper crust.
Yes.
Right? You know, tennis. Anyone? It's you go to the country club to play some tennis or
have some finger sandwiches.
Right. But that's an interesting point that you're making, because you're making quite the opposite point.
Right.
Right. But
no, not necessarily. Namely that in order to play tennis, right, it was a leisure sport. So you wouldn't start as a young child.
I see what you're saying.
Unless you came from wealth.
Right.
Because you'd be out digging potatoes or something like that.
Yes, exactly.
Just to make a living.
Exactly. Yeah. And then Marrou also, he cites evidence that parents even recognize at an early age for their children how essential that these clubs were. Mm-hmm. And so they're already kind of wrangling to get their boys in the proper clubs by the time they reach age 14, but when they're 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old.
Yeah.
Right?
I think maybe baseball used to serve some of this civic function. America's pastime. What is baseball's slogan? Mm-hmm. America's pastime, uniquely American game.
Yes.
Every major city had its team or teams, right? And the rivalries were intense. And politics even took a backseat to sports.
Yes.
It seems to me.
Right.
I don't know if American football holds that spot now. I don't think so. I don't think there is any kind of sense of shared sports participation. Maybe the Olympics.
But even that one, I think, has
debased.
It kind of has a stink on it.
You're
but
right.
I mean, just like you were talking about
the stink of performance-enhancing drugs.
Yeah, well, that kind of thing, and also rhythmic gymnastics. The jumping.
You really love to pile on rhythmic gymnastics,
jumping around while
don't you?
twirling ribbons. I wonder what our Greek forefathers would have thought of that. Right. But you mentioned baseball, so a slight digression apropos of very little.
Since we were so much on track before.
I'm currently reading a book by Eric Larson. Do you know him?
I don't.
Popular historian. Probably his most famous book is Devil in the White City. And, I really enjoy him. It's kind of a mix of novelistic readability and really good research.
Okay.
And he has his new book, which Beck got me for Father's Day, called The Demon of Unrest, which is about the kind of the time between the first election of Lincoln and the fall of Fort Sumter.
Ah, interesting.
And it's fascinating. And I did not realize that one of the elevated military personnel that was in Fort Sumter when it was being surrounded and eventually attacked was Abner Doubleday.
Oh.
Around whom the myth is that he's the guy who invented baseball.
Right.
Right. to the degree that Cooperstown,
yes,
where the Hall of Fame is
it's because he was born there?
He was born there, right? But there's no truth to it at all. And so
to the notion that he invented baseball?
Yes. There's almost no evidence that he had anything to do with the game whatsoever. But it's one of these weird little myths that stuck to him.
Have you gotten to the end? Who did invent it?
Well, we don't really know. I mean, there is no one guy like a James Naismith for basketball.
Right.
It seems to kind of, I think that baseball developed out of a kind of a series of English games and just kind of grew organically. But had nothing to do with Abner Doubleday, who was a minor hero at Fort Sumter.
But the Greeks believed that the way to civilize, so to speak, the Egyptians was to enroll them as young men in the ephebia, playing all the same sports.
Yes. Yeah. It's fascinating.
It is.
And there too, like with music, gym class is no longer a centerpiece of what we think of elite education anymore.
Not at all.
Yeah.
We probably ought to finish up this particular section when he talks about, Marrou talks about Hellenism among the Jews. This is quite fascinating.
You want to read something?
Can I read a little bit of this paragraph?
Yeah.
As an element in Hellenism, the ephebia was at the same time a powerful Hellenizing force. Anyone who had received a Greek education was a Greek. When the high priest Jason decided to introduce Hellenism into Jerusalem, his first step was to organize a body of ephebes from amongst the young noblemen and get them to wear a petasis. That's the fancy hat, remember?
I believe you called it the urban sombrero, right?
And then do exercises in the gymnasium. Wherever Hellenism went, the ephebia went too. Wherever it was slow in taking root, the ephebia too was slow to appear. In the cities of far-off Paphlagonia, it did not appear until the end of the 2nd century. The ephebia lasted as long as the ancient way of life itself. In AD 323, when Constantine had finally defeated his last enemy, Licinius, and when for more than 50 years the Athenian ephebia had ceased to be written about, ephebes were still to be found in Oxyrhynchus, which of course is in Egypt.
Right. Now that's really interesting because it colors a bit what he writes in the previous paragraphs. Is that so? What did it mean to be an elite Greek?
Right.
This would suggest that it had very little to do with ethnicity.
Right.
You
speak the language.
Wear the hat.
Play the games.
Right. And maybe being part of maybe the local aristocracy.
Yes.
Was a ticket in.
Right.
But it had nothing to do with where were you born.
Right.
And what is the blood running through your veins, which I find really interesting.
Is there a kind of an aristocracy in Jenison, Michigan, where you grew up? Didn't you grow up in Jenison?
I did. Yeah. Boy, that's a really good question.
If you could participate in the sporting event, then you're rubbing shoulders with the children of the aristocrats. And if you're out competing them, right?
Yes.
Beating them at their own game, that's the place which I don't know if you did. Did you?
What? Did I
out-compete them?
No.
Oh, I was wondering. That's where merit can have its moment.
Yeah.
Right? And then, the rich parents of the aristocratic kids can see, oh, Winkle, he's quite the athlete.
Yes.
He belongs here in the ephebia, and maybe we'll make him an honorary aristocrat.
Despite the humble roots from which he sprang.
Exactly. Okay, right. It can't all be, what's the word I'm looking for? Custard horns?
Cream curls.
Cream curls.
Well, custard horns a lot better.
Can't be all filling cream curls.
Right. No. Very true. Right. And yes, and athletic success was also a ticket to social cachet amongst your peers too.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Right.
But it eluded you.
It did. Sadly. Right. I know I had to make my way down other paths.
Yes.
Yeah.
The scribe, not the warrior.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So we want to move on then to the ephebic magistrates, which is the next section. What's going on here, Jeff?
Well, in this section, he talks about, how was this organized? Who was in charge? And what role did the state play in overseeing this? So
we know what the ephebia is. It's this so-called franchised version of Athenian education.
Right.
After Alexander's conquests, Athens is off the stage militarily. The polis doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
But they have succeeded in exporting this method or system of education for boys from ages 14 to 21 to the entire Mediterranean world.
Yeah.
And everybody with local flavor is imitating what the Athenians do.
Yes.
Literature and athletics.
And I love that you use the word franchising, because I think that's perfect. So, every McDonald's that you drive past has a lot of similarities with all the other McDonald's that you drive past, but they are individually owned and operated.
That's true. And they like to make a big deal out of that, right?
Yes, they do.
But when you go into them, you can't tell whether you're in Muncie, Indiana, right, or Seattle, Washington.
No.
Typically.
No, but there have been days, which I'm not proud of, on where I will buy a Diet Coke at one McDonald's,
right,
and then later in the day go to another McDonald's and buy a Diet Coke, and I'll notice that at one Diet Coke is about 30 cents cheaper.
Huh.
So, yeah. So
it's like a summer experiment of yours? You just go from McDonald's to McDonald's?
It's more to do with maybe an addiction
Diet
that I
Coke.
have. Right.
So why are you embarrassed about that?
Well, I mean, I think visiting a drive-through at a McDonald's is embarrassing enough, and then do it twice in one day.
I see. So I guess if this were to be more like the ephebia, each individual store, in addition to being independently owned and operated, would have to have some kind of local flavor.
I guess so. Yeah.
This is why people don't like fast food. They find it too commoditized, too industrialized.
Yeah. Right. So, it's maybe a McDonald's where in one part of town they might throw some like tacos on the menu.
Right.
The Mc burrito.
Yeah, the McRib was popular for a while.
I remember the McRib. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So a good analogy, but maybe not perfect. To kind of to tease this out.
Also, the Athenians weren't making any money on it.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
They were, however, getting lasting fame, and this goes back to the speech of Pericles, the funeral oration of Pericles in Thucydides' history. Right.
Yeah.
Wherein Pericles says Greece is the education of the world and Athens is the education of Greece.
Yes.
And by extension, I'm the leader of Athens. So knowledge flows from me.
From me, right, exactly. So if I could press the franchise analogy, just one more ridiculous
yes, you may.
Measure. So Isocrates would be like the McDonald brothers. Right. And then the rest of the Hellenistic world is like Ray Kroc,
right,
who kind of came in and kind of took their idea,
yes,
and then kind of repackaged it.
Yeah. Did you see that movie?
I did, with Michael Keaton as
the founder.
Yes. I enjoyed it very much.
Hey, this is a first. We need to honk some kind of horn.
Oh, you like this movie too?
This is a movie we both enjoyed.
Wow. I'm really kind of. I'm surprised that.
Are you disappointed?
I'm not disappointed.
There were no explosions. There were no car chases. There were no aquatic animals eating people. So what was there for me to like?
Well, I'm just curious. I mean, I just stumbled upon it like doom scrolling and said, that looks kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. Was it recommended to you? I'm just curious. No,
I stumbled on it in a similar fashion.
Wow, fantastic.
I think it was the yellow and red color that brought me in.
Yes, exactly. It's been very successful.
Drew me right in.
Well, we learned...
So the magistrates of the ephebia.
Yes. So we learned that to be one of these guys in charge was a very important position in the bureaucracy. So the ephebia, if I understand Marrou correctly, that primary and secondary education was much more kind of ad hoc, kind of fast and loose,
loosey-goosey.
But when you get to the ephebia, then education becomes a state concern.
I see.
And it becomes much more bureaucratic.
It's got to be accredited.
It's got to be exactly. Yes, exactly. And so you have to have appointed people in charge who apparently know what they're doing. And so we get terms like the gymnasiarch.
Yes, the gymnasiarchos.
Yes.
Yeah, that guy had a lot of power.
Yeah.
A very important person, and sometimes, says Marrou, the foremost man in the city.
Right. So
so your tennis pro, right?
Yes.
Your golf pro is now the most important man in the city.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine.
Milos.
I just saw that one the other day. Yeah. Please go on. Yeah.
That's all I got.
That's all you got? Right.
I got the Seinfeld reference, and then I'm done.
So it's the this is the era. I mean, to modern corollaries. This is where the dean,
right,
well, kind of ruled everything. Right. The administration is king.
Right.
So we learned he did like the gymnasiarch, or sometimes they were called the cosmetes, like the guardians of order. I think the way that Marrou translates that. And
but he didn't work alone.
No. There was all kinds of subdivisions.
Yeah, on top of 111, this exalted personage was assisted by an adjutant, the hypo, or less frequently, the anti-gymnasiarch.
Yes.
What would we call him? The undermaster of the gymnasium, the assistant to the master of the gymnasium.
Exactly.
In the same way in Athens, one and sometimes two hupoi or antikosmetes were installed beside the kosmete. I get a little sense that it's a make-work scheme.
Right. This part of the chapter almost put me to sleep.
Yeah,
it's bureaucracy.
They got their own business cards. They got to park their chariot in the special spot.
They do.
Got their own restroom installed in their office.
Right. So yeah, there's all. I mean, this paragraph is filled with these various different positions. Yeah.
In the 4th century, to go on, the administration of the ephebia was also guaranteed by the introduction of a committee.
No, not a committee.
Controllers of wisdom.
Oh my.
The sophronistai, 10 in number, elected on the basis of 1 to a tribe.
Right.
This committee disappeared at some unknown date. Don't committees always disappear? In the Hellenistic period, but it began to function again under the empire.
No.
And at this later period, it consisted of 6 sophronists with the same number with just as many hyposophronists.
Wow.
Underwise guys.
Yeah.
Controllers of wisdom.
Man.
I think that they were probably collecting big fees from the parents of these ephebes.
Oh, yeah.
In order to administer all this.
I would think so. Right, exactly. It's like, and for ridiculous things, like, the car salesman that says, you got to have that undercoating. Right.
Pinstriping.
Right, exactly. You need,
the finder's fee.
That's right. Yeah, your son is going to need, X, Y, and Z.
Right.
You got to line the pockets of these sophronistai.
Yeah.
All right, so Marrou writes, the gymnasiarch ruled from on high. He did not actually teach. So again,
grad school.
The ephebes were looked after by an expert known as the petatribe. That sounds terrible.
Yeah, so it just means the one that looks after the kids.
Right, exactly. It's just that prefix.
Yeah, okay,
right,
all right.
In Athens and the kosmete in the Egyptian gymnasiums. This person often had a subordinate officer who took direct charge of the young conscripts.
It seems to be like a scheme to pass the buck, right? Who actually is doing the instruction? It just keeps getting passed from person to person.
Exactly. This is not my job.
Right. The gymnasiarch, the hupogymnasiarch, then the petatribe, then the cosmate, then to someone else.
Right. Exactly. So what are these I can see maybe the gymnasiarch, he's the guy who's got a... where the buck ultimately stops.
Right.
He's in charge of overseeing everything. But what are these intermediaries doing? Are they just kind of blowing the whistle and getting these kids from one place to another?
Finding the pennies, maybe, so that you can tell the one kid from the other kid?
I don't know.
Lining up snacks, probably.
Probably snack
Getting
patrol.
out the popsicles.
There we go. That's what I'd buy. Right. So, a subordinate officer who took direct charge of the young conscripts. He was the master of the ephebes. And there's a number of different Greek
Can I
titles.
read those?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, please.
Because they're
ahead.
good.
Yeah.
The ephebarchos, the euergetes, and the I messed up. Ephebophulax.
The ephebophulax, that's my favorite one.
Yeah.
Right. The guardian of the ephebes.
That's right.
And he was sometimes chosen from amongst the ephebes themselves. So even the kids are a pool for bureaucrats.
So the cosmate would look at the group of kids running laps in the gym, and he'd pull one aside and he'd say, "Johnny, you look to me like ephebophulax material."
I say, now you're in charge of what he went out for a smoke?
I think so.
Oh, man. I still remember my parents, fretting about whether I was actually ephebophulax material.
Yeah, in my high school gym class, one of the gym teachers mostly ate donuts.
Is that right?
In front of us while we ran laps. It's a true story.
Oh my gosh, it sounds like
he would sit and eat donuts, and we would just be running laps. Yeah.
Keep it going.
That's right. The gymnasiarch was therefore a kind of director general.
Yes.
Or rather, the principal of the ephebia. But this is a great line from Marrou, worth the price of the book. Can you read just that next sentence? And don't go too fast at the beginning.
Yes. He says, I must apologize for going into such detail.
Yeah, there. See, we go.
Right. But perhaps I have enabled the reader to gain some idea of the solicitude which the Hellenistic cities continued to display for this institution even after it had lost its original military purpose and become an instrument of higher education.
And speaking of solicitude,
yes,
it's time for the ads.
That one actually fits.
Thank you.
This episode of Ad Nauseam is brought to you by Ratio Coffee. At ratiocoffee.com, listeners, you can find these magnificent, sleek wonderful machines, these pour-over machines that will brew the perfect cup of coffee every single morning. If you're a regular listener, you know that we've been talking about it for years now. And Dave and I have waxed eloquent about
That's right.
The ratio 6, and now we both have the ratio 8. Dave, talk to us a little bit about these machines and why you love them.
Sure. Well, you remember that a couple weeks ago you brought me by your ratio 6 very generously so I could re-gift it to someone else. So I was in the process of cleaning it up and took it apart a little bit. Remarkably easy to clean. Not that it needs that much cleaning. Got it all done, but I didn't think I had the cord.
Oh, yes.
So what I did was I used my ratio 8 so I could pass this along to a friend.
Yeah.
Because it works with the 6. But then guess what?
What?
I didn't have a cord for myself.
You can't do that?
So for almost a week, I have been doing pour over the old-fashioned way.
Really?
I'm using the ratio setup. I've got the hulking flagon, the tankard, and I got the little cone and such.
Yeah.
I put my grounds in there, but then I'm doing the pouring myself.
Actual manual pour.
That's right. With my arm, I push the button, but nothing happens.
Right.
Because there's no cord, but it's just nostalgia kind of. I have to push that button,
Of course.
Morning.
Right.
The coffee's okay, but I really miss the convenience and the ritual of bloom, brew, and
it's ready.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's wonderful. As you mentioned, I think one of the things I like about is in some ways how simple these
absolute simplicity.
Machines are. Yeah, it's a push up a button, and when you do remove parts to do some cleanup, it's amazing just again how simple.
That's right.
The machine is.
And pass this along to a friend, and I got a text from that person, and they said, "You're going to like this."
Yeah.
The first batch is done and the reviews are in.
Yes.
5 stars, no brackish tang.
Excellent.
Yeah, that made me feel really good. Look at how our nonsense has permeated the minds of at least a few.
Right. Now, I'm sure many listeners who've heard us talk about the 6 and 8 say that sounds great, but it's a little bit too rich for my blood. We're excited to announce coming soon the ratio 4.
That's right.
Which is going to be a game changer.
I would say it's as easy as pods, but so much better.
Okay.
Do you ever wonder, Jeff, what the convenience of a Keurig really costs?
It's crossed my mind.
Okay, so on average, it's $33 to $50 per pound, depending on the roaster. And what do you get for that?
You get mediocre coffee.
Okay.
Yeah.
How is it brewed?
It's brewed with haste and waste at the forefront into throwaway plastic pods. And so Ratio has come up with a better way. And
so Mark says, buy fresh from your local roaster and have the 4 brew up a cup. The taste will be monumentally better.
Right. So meet the Ratio 4, the first affordable and beautiful half-batch pour-over coffee machine. The 4 is Ratio's smallest brewer yet, an agile, sleek machine that puts out between 5 and 20 ounces of coffee per batch. So it's just random. You hit this button and you get what you get?
You can dial it in.
I see. Right. Enough for 1 or 2 reasonably sized cups or 1 big travel mug.
That's correct. So no more pods, no more, poking the thing on the top and the marsupods that they sell with a little bit of Joey in every sip.
Yes, ridiculous.
No, this is a better way to go. It's still got the still brews with the bloom cycle in about 4 minutes or less. It's going to take up less countertop real estate and much more affordable. I'm convinced, Jeff, this is going to make a Ratio a household name.
Yes, I'm so excited for this to come out, and hopefully we can do some kind of promotional deal.
Absolutely.
Maybe a giveaway, so stay tuned for that. But in the meantime,
that's right.
Do yourself a favor, visit ratiocoffee.com. Check out what they got there. If you want one of the 6s, you want one of the 8s, click it into your grocery basket. And Dave, what's our coupon code?
The coupon code for the month of June is ANCOA and then 8. So ANCOA 8.
Do we know what the A stands for?
I do not know what the A stands for.
I'm
Anonymity?
Anonymity.
You buy one and we'll never know about it.
Perfect.
The Ratio 6 simulates a skilled barista pour-over process, and I was not skilled, by the way, precisely metering water flow through both the bloom and the brew phases. All of the taste.
Yes, and none of the work. That's
Check
right.
it out. This episode of Ad Nauseam is brought to you by Leather Jacket Publishing.
Wait. Leather Jacket Publishing?
Yeah, you haven't heard of them?
Is this a new sponsor for us?
It's a new sponsor.
Okay. What kind of books do they?
Books by Fonzie.
Yes.
Books by Pinky Tuscadero.
Pinky Tuscadero. And Leather Tuscadero as well?
Yes.
Yes, right.
Leather Jacket Publishing.
Yeah. So is that like the jacket itself is
hadn't
leather?
I didn't think it through that
Okay,
far,
I
Jeff,
gotcha.
to be honest.
Right. But I think you're mistaken. No, Leather Jacket is not our sponsor. It's actually Hackett Publishing.
Hackett.
Right.
Okay.
An easy mistake to make.
Do you know how hard it is to find things that rhyme with Hackett?
So
when you've used all the best ones
Right.
already, stack it, smack it, whack it, quack it.
now we're down to Leather Jacket.
I'm running out.
Yeah, right. So maybe it's best to turn to
Should we turn it
our
off?
actual sponsor.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Hackett Publishing, with offices in Cambridge, Ma, and Indianapolis Inn, have been in business for 53 years, if I'm not mistaken.
Incredible.
54 almost.
Yes, exactly.
And what have they been bringing to a mass audience?
They have been bringing affordable, attractive, and incredibly well done translations of works from the classical world, along with all kinds of different academic tones on various topics across the humanities, Islamic studies,
East Asian,
philosophy,
South American.
If you're interested in any of that, Hackett will have something for you.
Absolutely.
As we've said many times, we love it. They will do multiple translations of the same work, so you can get the variety within one publisher. It's just something you don't see all that often out there.
That's right.
And Hackett does it very well, and they are keeping the flame alive.
That's right. A lot of people complain about the degradation of education. Kids aren't reading the classics anymore. They're not learning and interested, or maybe adults, can't get the education that our grandparents got. And I don't know if that's true, but why curse the darkness when, you can whistle a tune by buying some of these volumes from Hackett and reading them?
Yes. So check out hackettpublishing.com. That's HACKETT publishing.com. Scroll through their immense catalog. You're going to like what you see. And what you can do is then find the books that you want, click them over into your little satchel, and then type in this coupon code AN2024, and that will get you two incredible things, 20% off. And what else, Dave?
Free shipping.
Indeed.
Check it out. Okay, Jeff, as we get back into it and we start to wind down here on this particular chapter, Hellenistic Educational Institutions,
yes,
we go to the top of page 112, and that is the section entitled The Absence of State Schools.
Yes.
So, Jeff, what's going on here?
Well, let's let Marrou speak for himself.
Okay.
Let me read a little bit at the beginning of that section. He says, one would have thought that since the state was so concerned with the proper functioning of educational establishments, it would have taken on their direction and upkeep itself. Hellenistic scholars have projected this logical attitude into the past and attributed the institution of free compulsory schooling to the old lawgiver Charondas of Catana, conveniently confusing him for their purpose with his colleague Zeleucus of Locrace. Unfortunately, there was an obstacle to the application of this strict logic, and that was the city's economic structure, which generally speaking had remained archaic and was consequently very shaky. It had neither the resources nor the administrative apparatus that would have enabled it to take direct charge of public education. So he's saying that there's kind of a little myth that it was tax funded, it was run by the state, and anybody who wanted to could go to school for free, but that was not the case.
Not the case.
No.
Now, the institution where you work, Grand Rapids Community College, I understand that tuition is highly subsidized by the city of Grand Rapids.
It is.
So that if you are a resident of the city of Grand Rapids, you can go there almost for free.
It is. It's true, right? So if you go to one of the local public schools here, for all intents and purposes, you can attend there tuition free.
And that, I guess, if we compare it to this, is because the city does not have a shaky economic structure. It was not archaic.
I guess so.
Right.
Yeah. Indeed, it's not a perfect system, but
right.
it's very different from what Marrou's describing here. So he's saying, so well, how did they pay for it?
Right.
And a lot of it came down to tapping wealthy citizens to dip into their own pockets to pay for this.
Yeah, I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that term tap. It puts me in mind of like a maple tree.
Right.
That's the metaphor.
Right.
Or
I guess so.
A keg of beer, right? You just pull on their head and out comes the money. Or
right.
Just put a little, a little sluice into their side and out comes the maple syrup.
Right. Yeah. So I think in that regard, you're right. It's a bad turn of phrase.
It
is. Marrou is making the argument is that these people were not strong armed into doing this, but it was considered
civic honor.
It was considered a civic honor, noblesse oblige, to do this kind of thing.
Well, that was very nice, Jeff, because Marrou is a Frenchman.
Oh wow,
that's really good.
Thank you.
People do say I'm tapped out.
Right.
Can you loan me $10?
I'm tapped out.
How many times did I ask you that when we were in Greece or in Italy?
That got so old.
Can I borrow 10 euros?
Right, exactly.
Inevitably, you would say, I'm tapped out.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And what I really didn't like was the histrionic padding of the pockets. And,
I did that.
Yeah,
first,
exactly. Every time, oh man,
where's that 100 bill on it?
Right. I'm tapped out.
But says Marrou, the growing sense of the social importance of education suffered under this neglect. Mm-hmm. And a practical solution was found by appealing to the generosity of private individuals, asking them to supply financial backing for a matter of common concern. Yep. This was an appeal to the benefactor, the euergetes, a title of great renown, which much sought after by sovereigns, and granted to private individuals in many special honor decrees.
A do-gooder. Yeah. Right? Exactly. Yes.
Mm-hmm. The Andrew Carnegie's.
Yes.
Right. He'll build a public library.
Right.
My little town where I grew up, east of here, has a public library, a beautiful building in kind of a neoclassical style, with sandstone built on the bluff of the river, and paid for, if I'm not mistaken, by Andrew Carnegie.
Is that right?
Almost entirely.
Wow.
So he's the benefactor of a town he never visited.
Yeah. And so I think, yes, so Marrou suggests that a lot of that kind of stuff went on a comparatively at the smaller scale to than someone like a Rockefeller or Carnegie, but the same general idea that these wealthy citizens were I want to say tapped, but they were kind of taken aside and say this would be a great honor for you and the city if you paid for all of this.
So why did this come to an end? I mean, Marrou kind of tells us here in the last sentence.
Yes, he writes, when patriotism and the desire for fame no longer suffice to move an impoverished bourgeoisie to such acts of generosity, the state, that is the empire, was obliged to introduce coercive measures to combat the shirking of municipal responsibility, and its demands, which grew daily more exacting, set the Roman world on the road to the totalitarianism of the late empire.
So there's a kind of a theory of history there.
Yeah.
If patriotism and noblesse oblige, did I do that right?
Very nicely done.
Okay, are no longer enough to get wealthy private citizens to cough up the support for the schools, then the state steps in and starts to strong-arm people, right?
Right.
And this led to totalitarianism.
Yeah, that's.
I don't know if Marrou's right, but it is a coherent description of what he believes happened.
Right. And I think he even says uses examples later in this chapter. What's the date on this book again?
1950s.
1950s. So
late 1950s.
It's clear that the memory of World War II and Nazism is very fresh in his mind. Right.
It haunts the whole thing.
Right. And so he talks about kind of the parallels that he sees with totalitarianism in the history of education. That's very much in the air and in the water.
Right.
Yeah.
While you were talking and I was listening carefully,
yes,
I also flipped to the front of the book and found it's 1956.
Well, even so.
That's close.
Even so, barely over 10 years after the end of the
Yes, war. Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we go on then to school foundations. And I think this was probably the dullest portion of the chapter, so we should read every word.
I wrote the word snooze in the margin twice in this section.
It's interesting that you feel the need to write down your emotional state as you're reading something.
It helps me.
Do you also write down things like enthused, surprised?
I will either like a little smiley face or a sad face.
Emojis.
My hand drawn emojis.
Yes. That's interesting.
It's like to be reminded of how I felt.
Yeah.
So I started to actually wander off from this section. Because
okay. The chips you were eating while you were reading the book, they weren't making it to your mouth. They're just landing on your chest.
Exactly right. So we might want to move fairly quickly.
Okay.
Over this section,
all right.
Right.
So what do we want to say about it?
Well, I thought actually some of these calculations of what people were the money that they were putting up, I thought was kind of interesting.
It's a cocktail napkin again?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so lay it on us.
Right. So he on pages 111 to 112, Marrou writes about some of these donations that private citizens made. One guy put up 34,000 drachma, invested at like 6 or 8% interest, and the interest was used to pay teacher salaries.
Smart.
And without going into the details, that's roughly someone putting up about $4.4 million in today's monies. Another donor, 60,000 drachma, roughly $7.8 million.
Wow.
And again, using the interest, the yearly interest to kind of pay the basic fees of the school.
That's a lot of scratch.
But then I looked up what Harvard University's current endowment
Don't
is.
even tell me. Let me take a guess.
Yes, it's
$23 billion.
It's more than double that. $49.4 billion.
Oh my goodness.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
Right.
Now that's a lot of scratch.
That is a lot of scratch. Right. What are they doing with it?
I don't know.
Why does it cost so much to go there?
I don't know. Well, you have a lot of questions. You don't sound like Harvard material.
No, I mean, what was I wasn't even ephebia material, so Harvard, forget it, right? Right. So I thought, despite kind of the snoozeroo that these paragraphs were, it was interesting that there's inscriptions that show exactly what these funds were used for: paying teacher salaries, covering the requisite religious sacrifices.
Probably those little quart or cup containers of milk that they used to serve us.
Exactly.
In that little plastic.
Yes.
You remember that? Not plastic. I'm sorry. It's waxed paper.
Waxed paper.
And you have to struggle to get the thing open and put that tiny little
straw in there, right?
So small that you got a headache trying to draw any milk up through it.
Yes, I have a very strong memory of it being one of my jobs as a first grader to go down to the giant refrigerator and they had the big plastic crate.
I don't think
that was filled with these things.
Yes, I remember that, but I don't think the refrigerator was kept at a very cold temperature.
Because it was balmy in there.
It was. When you drank the milk out of that wax-covered container, something wasn't right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
We needed a benefactor to pay for a better refrigerator.
Totally, exactly right. So
we move on then to private schools.
Yes.
114. However that may be, says Marrou, in our account of school institutions, pride of place must undoubtedly go to the private schools, which functioned on a strictly commercial basis, the teacher receiving fees from his pupils.
Right. So straight tuition.
That's correct. Yep. The documentary evidence about them is quite consistent and artless, both in the case of literary schools like the one described so picturesquely in the Mime of Herodotus, and in the case of establishments of physical education like the Palistras, basically Planet Fitness, which were named after their proprietor or manager, Timaeus Palaestra and Antigone's Palaestra. In Athens, there was Stasius's Palaestra. There was Gold's Gym. No, it's Nicias's Palaestra. And the Palaestra run by the two Nicorati, the father and son, in Delos.
Interesting.
You know what they studied there?
What?
Karate.
And the karate?
You can just see the ads.
Oh. This reminds me of the building in which my office is and where I teach most of my classes.
Right.
There was a few years ago, there was a very wealthy local benefactor who put up the money for the refurbishment of the whole building.
Nice.
And his only requirement was that his name be in giant blue letters at the top of the building. Right.
Okay.
And which is a wonderful gift. Right. And it's a great facility. The guy just has, and I can say this because of my own last name.
Okay.
A kind of an unfortunate last name. He is Raleigh J. Finkelstein.
Oh, okay.
So now our hall is referred to as Finkelstein Hall.
Okay.
Right? So as someone with the last name Winkle, I guess
you've got Joe Community on that one.
I guess I got Joe Community, but kind of proud. Like, okay, somebody else who has a goofy name has got his name up in lights. There.
All it would take is for you to swap one letter.
Right, from Winkle to Finkel?
And then, yes, right. Winkelstein.
Winkelstein, yeah.
I guess if I had that many resources and I gave them to the construction of a building, the reason I don't think I'd want my name on it is not because of a sense of modesty, but I don't want to be responsible for what happens there.
Yeah.
I don't want to be associated with whatever goes on inside the building.
Right. Well, Marrou talks about how, I think in a similar fashion, is that for a lot of these wealthy benefactors, it was the money, and it was civic pride, but that didn't mean that they were on the board of trustees.
No, they had no control.
Right. And so like Mr. Finkelstein, I've never gotten a note from Mr. Finkelstein complaining about what I've been teaching.
Okay.
He donated the money. He's got his name on the building.
And that's it.
But I think you're right, though.
You don't have him on speed dial? Like Fink, this is Wink.
Oh, that'd be beautiful. But I think you're right, though. I don't know how many people are aware of that, but if there was some scandal at GRCC, when people say, well, what's Mr. Finkelstein?
Right.
What is he?
His name's on the building?
Yeah, exactly. His hands are dirty.
Correct.
Right. Yeah.
So we got two brief sections before we put this chapter to rest.
Yes.
Liturgies and maintenance foundations, and then the games and the festivals official sanction.
Yes.
So what's going on in this penultimate section?
Let's see here. Let's again let Marrou talk for himself. Right. So he says, The time came, particularly in Athens, when gymnasiarch, in Athenian language, kosmete, no longer meant the magistrate in charge of the ephebia, but a wealthy citizen who paid to keep the institution going for a year. He might even be an ephebe. Even when the gymnasiarch was an actual magistrate, the liturgical element was not necessarily absent by any means. Theoretically, the city allotted him a fixed sum, but it was an understood thing that it relied upon him to add any extras that were necessary out of his own pocket. So this is our Finkelstein.
Yeah.
Right.
The benefactor.
Yeah, so either for out of the ordinary things like repairs to an old gymnasium or the construction of a new one. That's the one you'd put your name on.
Right.
Or even the normal running costs for equipment and maintenance and teachers' salaries.
Yes.
Yes. Those are not very...
And the Gatorade fund.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't want to win too often because then you go through Gatorade,
right.
dumping it on the coach.
Exactly, right. And that's not a sexy donation.
No.
The gymnasium, but you don't want to pay for the towels.
That's right.
Right.
Well, I mean, it was fortunate for them that they had all of those resources from those wealthy citizens to carry on this kind of education.
Right.
The top of 115, we're getting right down to the end, a woman could share the honor and also the financial obligation with her husband or her son. Sometimes she could receive the actual office. Sometimes for the same reason, this might fall to a baby, because it was the heir to a great fortune.
So the baby's now running the show? Right? How did that go?
I'm sure the baby was not at the board meeting.
Right? No, exactly. What a mess.
It's like something out of a Dickens novel at that point.
Right. But it's like the DeVos family.
Right.
These things pass
Local
down
benefactors.
to the generations, right?
Or the Meyer family.
Yeah. Right, exactly. Another big
grocery
local
store folks. So finally, Jeff, the games and the festival's official sanction.
Right. I thought this was interesting. And when Marrou talks about it was the role of the ephebes to perform at these public rituals and to run the festivals, to compete in the games.
Yes.
And Marrou makes the suggestion that we might see this as these are your final exams.
Okay.
And so it's I wrote something down here is that maybe this was a display so that the city could kind of see what is this money being spent for.
Right.
It also made me think of the great Panathenaic frieze on the Parthenon, where you have all these young Athenian men on the horses, right, going by this very cinematic comic strip, right? And the elite, beautiful young men. Kind of showing up in public, doing important things religiously, doing important things for civic pride, and doing them well and doing them with dignity is a way of kind of showing the community is that this is what it's all about.
Right. Pageantry,
yes.
Maybe to wrap it up, we should read a bit of the last paragraph here.
Please, would you?
Sure. One of the major responsibilities of the magistrates, especially concerned with education, the gymnasiarchs and the pedonomes, was to organize these processions and see that the young people who took part in them behaved in an orderly and dignified way that would do the city credit.
Yes.
So no gum chewing.
No,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
Insofar as we can reconstruct the school calendar as it must have existed in Hellenistic cities, the most striking thing is the number of holidays of obligation, not holidays, not time off,
right,
but days on which official ceremonies took place, in which the young people, the school children, and the ephebes took part in plays that were both civic and religious, the equivalent of the great rallies. And now he swerves toward his memory of World War II. The great rallies, which have been reintroduced in our own day by the various totalitarianisms.
Which I thought was kind of a big
dark note.
It's a very dark note, and it's kind of a big old matzo ball hanging out there.
You're right.
What?
Because it's the end of the chapter.
Right, where are you going with this? Right?
I think what he is suggesting, and I don't know if he's writing from a sense of hurt as a survivor of all of the Nazism and the fascism and so forth.
Yeah.
As well as the Vichy French.
Yeah.
But he seems to be suggesting behind all of this stuff there was a lot of coercion.
Yeah.
And it wasn't all pleasant. The ephebia served a dark purpose.
Right. I mean, I think he's referencing. We're supposed to think of Nuremberg.
Correct.
Right? Yeah. It's I just thought that was a kind of a curveball at the end, but that's. I mean,
you mean it's both a curveball and a matzo ball?
Exactly. It's a matzo ball thrown, spinning. Yeah, exactly. But I also thought that detail when he talks about holidays of obligation. This isn't like the school choir you are performing at the winter Christmas concert, and that's it. No, there were
Get out in March.
There were tons of these things.
Correct.
Right, and so
and march and keep step and show that the benefactors spent his money wisely, and you're learning literature and you can recite Plato and you know your Homer.
Right.
It's more like a school play, but with lots of pressure.
Lots of pressure, and it's you're showing the public, reminding them who the elites are.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, that wraps it up.
Yes, indeed.
I think we need to get out of here for no particular reason.
No reason at all.
Okay.
So before we go, let's talk about a couple things.
Yes, let's do
Dave,
that.
I'm sure some of our audience out there would love to learn some Greek and would love to learn some Latin, and you have a way for them to do this.
I can help for sure. The Moss method for Greek will take you from
neophyte to erudite.
That is correct. If you know little or no Greek, I can help you learn a lot of Greek in a relatively short amount of time and also painlessly. I have a number of students who have studied Greek in other settings, and while I don't want to speak ill of others, I can say this with great confidence. Many people study Greek for a while in a particular setting, a school, a seminary, something like that, and when the experience is over, they routinely say, I can't remember any of that.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I haven't learned anything. That makes me really sad.
Yeah.
Because what's the purpose then in doing it? It's not just to check off a box. I've developed a method that I'm really confident will help those students gain tremendous confidence and ability. It's thorough, but also you're not just memorizing rules. Yes, there's grammar, but you're reading stories. It's contextualized.
And from the very beginning, you're reading stories.
The very first lesson, you're reading about a troublesome boy. Sometimes I think about you, Jeff, when I read
bet
that
you
one.
do. Yes.
All these delightful, charming stories. A pedant learns about a ladder. He climbs up the ladder, and then he asks, is it the same number of steps whether I go up or down? It's a clever little funny thing.
Good stuff.
Aesop, Lucian of Samosata, there's some Plato thrown in there, some Herodotus, lots of good material. So
excellent.
Go to mossmethod.com, check out the program. We're running a special. You can buy modules 1 and 2 together at quite a distinct discount. If you want to study Latin, I have a Latin program as well based on Hans Orberg's Lingua Latina per se illustrata. Go to latinperdiem.com/LLPSI. I started a new feature on my YouTube channel teaching you how to do some Latin composition. I take a sentence of Cicero, I analyze it, then I take it apart and put it back together, showing how you can ring variations on Cicero's sentence structure in order to compose your own Latin and thereby learn it more completely.
Nice. Nicely done. So where should people go to find that?
latinperdiem.com/LLPSI. Also have a special units 1 and 2. You can get them at 20% off.
Excellent. Go do it. Do yourself a favor. Hey, we got people to thank as always. Mishka, our wonderful engineer, always turning it around in record time.
That's right.
Making us two chuckleheads sound a lot better
That's
than
right.
we are.
Occasionally laughing, I'm told, while she's in the process.
I believe it.
I think she's laughing at our absurdity, but hey, I'll take it.
I'll take it.
Exactly. We need to thank
who else?
Ken Tamplin and Scott Van Zen, the musicians who give us the intro and outro music. Scott is playing that blistering guitar, those blazing arpeggios. You should check this guy out. If you like blues, you like rock, you like something that's a little bit like Eddie Van Halen and Stevie Ray Vaughan, he's a master of all those genres.
Fantastic.
Produces some great music. And Ken gives us the bumper music. Thankful for their generosity. Jeff, do we want the listeners to go to our website?
Of course we do, right? So if they want to pick up one of these wonderful T-shirts, a Quai Nocent Docent T-shirt, go to adnauseum.com. That's ad nauseum. Don't forget the V in there.
Click on the shop button, and that will take you to Lurch with Merch.
Yes, and that you can find stickers there. You can find shirts. Show that you are taking in the classics and keeping them down. And hey, if you want to shout out, if you got a question, I got a wonderful response from a listener this week with a really interesting question about a recent episode
about Bunnyman Bridge.
Yes,
right,
and I loved it. And so we'd love to hear from you, and it makes our job more fun, and it makes us better at what we do.
Yes, we want to honor you and put your name in the spotlight, however small, for keeping the flame alive.
Right. So you can write to Dave. At Dave@adnauseum.com. Don't forget that V.
Or Jeff@adnauseum.com. Don't forget there is a V, ADNAVSEAM.
Yes.
Now, Jeff, for next week, I'm going to come off script here for a minute.
Yes.
And you can correct me, but if I'm wrong, the current episode we're recording right now, 153, is going to drop still in the month of June.
Yes.
But for the following week, I thought we would look at the patriotic July 4 theme. What do you think?
That's right. I had forgotten about that. I got too excited about the topic I was thinking about. But okay.
The Carl Richard
Yes.
and what is it? The the golden age of classics in America.
That's right.
One, maybe 2 episodes, and then we'll get on to this awesome one that you have written down.
Fantastic.
Here.
You're right. I had forgotten about what time of year it was.
That's right.
We'll do that. Yep.
And I believe, Dr. Winkle, you have the gustatory parting shot.
Right. So I thought this would be a nice bookend. We started the show with a quote talking about kind of Chinese education.
Nice.
And this is a quote apparently from Confucius, who once said, "Stop eating when 7/10 full." It's a very specific fraction.
I was thinking about that.
Yeah.
It seems like wisdom in the general sense, but it's so specific.
It's so specific.
What if I stop at 69%?
I don't know.
Not enough?
Well,
if I stop at 71%? Whoa, too much.
Too much.
Back off, fella.
You're out of the school.
Right.
But it also struck me as like, I could maybe ballpark when I'm half full.
Right.
But beyond that, no, I can't do it.
It's either half full or stuffed.
Right.
I can't really hit the 70% mark.
Right. So no shade at Mr. Confucius,
No.
but this one's lost on me.
Have we taken all the fun out of this quote?
We might have. Let's stop while we're behind.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.